All right. Bueno, buenos días. I'm going to transfer over to English now. So, ¿cómo estuvo esa primera presentación? Last thing in Spanish. How was that first presentation? And you guys were here? Yeah? Good? Good, good. All right. So, our next guest has roughly 15 years worth of experience in the video game industry as an executive producer and a producer. He also works. Oh, he's got a couple of things here. So, and he's going to talk to us about a little bit here and there, bits of experience he's picked up in those 15 years along the way as far as game publishing goes. So, as the title says, game publishing from start to finish. I'm going to leave you guys. Give him a warm applause. Patrick Kelly.
I went from, this was a big company, but we were kind of a satellite. So I went from small to huge to then medium and then back down to small. So lately I've been doing a lot of lecturing and teaching and things like that. So that is that's my background. Thank you. Yes, somebody already has a question.
What games did you work on Bandai Namco?
Worked on. We partnered with with EA to work on Hellgate London, which was an MMO style game, and then I also helped with the team working on Afro Samurai and Slaughterhouse, I think is the yeah. So, yep. Yeah, a lot of fun. Oh, another question already. Yeah.
How did you feel like moving from different companies? Because I remember Sierra used to be a very well-known studio, and then from moving to different companies, how did that work? Because usually some people either take years or even decades being in the same company. But how did it feel for you moving into different companies and just like meeting different people, working with different people in general?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm by nature I'm kind of a homebody. I like to stay at home and play video games, of course, and watch TV and watch movies and everything. So I made a conscious effort that in order to be successful, I was going to have to push myself way outside of my comfort zone. So that's why I took a lot of the chances and I went from studio to studio. And because when you're at a studio or you're at any job for a long period of time, it takes a while for you to get promoted. And they either create a new position, or if you're lucky, your boss gets run over by a truck and you get to have his job. So, but if I'm working at a company and I'm a producer, and I'm hoping, I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody, but I want a promotion. So I could wait for one to be created, but if I go online and I look for jobs, chances are somebody needs like a senior producer. And so then you can climb in the ranks really quickly that way. And most places that you work at, you get let's say between a 5 and a 10% raise every single year. And that's for a game company, and that's doing pretty well. And cost of living is about a 3%. So if you get a 10% raise, you need to account for inflation. So minus 3, so you get about a 7% raise. That's how cost of living works. So you could get, you get a 7% raise or whatever when you work at a studio. But if you go somewhere else, you get like $10,000-$15,000 more. So there's pros and there's cons about jumping from studio to studio. I mean, I know this is a very long answer to your question. There's there's something to be said. It's exciting. It's new. Everything is like new. You get to learn new stuff. You get a promotion. You get more money. You get treated really well. But then on the downside, you don't have any friends. You have to keep moving all the time. You know, there's a lot of stuff, and I can get into that more later on. So, but let me just jump in. Let me just jump into some of the stuff I have going on, and then I'll break in the middle, and we can ask some more questions. So when you first start a game, and you have an idea for a game, you gotta start somewhere, and you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to ask yourself some really hard questions. And one of the best places to start is you ask yourself, what's driving my game? If I'm an artist, chances are that the art is driving my game. If I'm a coder, code, and so on and so forth, right? And so you've got a game like, let's say, Portal. And Portal is a game that's designed around code. It's a coder made something really cool, which was this teleportation gun, and you jump through the portals. And they were like, okay, we made this cool technology, so now let's figure out how to make a game out of this. Then you've got other games which are driven by art. So you got a game like Assassin's Creed, which is just a beautiful game, you know, and they're like, this looks awesome. Now let's figure out how to make a game out of this. And then you've got stuff like that is very story driven. Like let's say, you know, what's that? Final Fantasy. Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. Final Fantasy. So you have a story, and they're like, okay, we got this big epic story that I want to tell. How do I make a game out of that? So you figure out what it is that you're trying to do, and from what angle. And if you look at like the game Limbo, you know, Limbo is very dark, and it was a very art-driven thing. And they were like, I have this art style and this way of doing things, and so I want to make a game out of that. So as long as you know where you're coming from and you know what's driving the game, then that's a really good place to start. And I put audio down by itself because even if you have an audio-based game like Guitar Hero or something like that, it's still based on mechanics. So audio, honestly, is the icing on the cake. Audio, anybody who's in audio, I don't know if there's any audio people in here, but audio is really super like layered system, and that makes everything so much better. But you can't really have a game focused on just the audio. That's very hard to do. So usually you end up with art, code, or story. So the next step is once you know what you're doing, you know what kind of game you want to make, and you've got this idea, you want to create what's called a one page, or they'll say like your elevator pitch. Some of you guys might have heard that already. And so you'll have your elevator pitch, and you say like, so what is this game about? And you want to list off the top 3 mechanics. You know, if we're talking about, say, Mario or something like that, one of the top mechanics are the jumping, of course, the running, and like, you know, the obstacle avoidance. So those are the top 3 mechanics for something like that. So you want to figure out, and this is also called, this can help, and I'll get back to this a little later, which is called your razor statement. And once you figure out what it is you're trying to make and the top 3 mechanics, 3 to 5 that you want to do, what's this game most similar to? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, everybody wants to try to make a new, unique game, and they're really loath to say, it's like GTA, only it's going to be a cartoon. You know, and then that makes you feel like nobody's going to take me seriously because I'm basically just ripping off GTA. But there's nothing wrong with setting the image in people's mind so they know where you're going, right? Like I've joked around quite a few times that say if I could try to spend all afternoon trying to tell you about this concept I have, right? But if I say, okay, it's like Indiana Jones, but you're a chick and you have guns. And it's like, that's Tomb Raider, right? And it's like, now everybody knows what I'm talking about. And I'm like, okay, now that everybody knows, now let's start talking about some stuff. And there's nothing wrong with doing that because then you don't have to spend an hour trying to tell everybody what the what it is. You just tell everybody what the differences are. Difference between Tomb Raider and Indiana Jones are these 4 things, right? So what's the age range? That's an important thing, and that's often overlooked. Is like, what age are you going for? Who's going to be playing your game? What's your, you'll hear the word demographic. What's your demographic? Are you going for kids? Are you going for teenagers? Are you going for college-age people? Like, who are you going for? And then what type of game is it? Is it a platformer? Is it a shooter? Is it a puzzle-based game? Like, these are all questions you have to ask yourself. What's the mood of the game? Is it a funny game? Is it a dark game? Is it, you have dark humor? Like, there's all these different things. And these will feed into your Razor statement, which, like I promised, I'll tell you a little bit more about. And then what's the overall goal of the game? Like, what experience do you want to convey to the audience? What do you want them to walk away with? You want them to be like, I want to scare the crap out of them? Or I want them to have a really fun time? I want them to beat up their friends? Like, what is it that you want them to do, right? And then you go, yeah, Mario Party. Yeah, it's like, you can beat up on your friends without getting in trouble. And wreck your relationships. Kind of like Monopoly. Once you have some of those questions in your mind, you want to create what's called a deck. And a deck is basically just like a PowerPoint presentation that goes over a very high level of what your game is going to be about. And I think they call it a deck because it's just like a deck of cards. You print it out and you have, it's funny because you make a PowerPoint presentation, but then the executives still make you print it out so they can follow along. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they can look ahead when they get bored, So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Basically, it's technically a strategy too.
Yes.
It's helping for people to organize their ideas.
Yes, exactly. This whole thing is to help you organize your ideas, get your ideas together in a cohesive way that you can then share them with other people. And when you go through this process, it also helps point out things to you. It makes you go through this kind of routine or this series of steps, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Because sometimes you have an idea, but you don't understand the whole world. So I created a small little game for you guys, to show you how I would go about doing it if I were to do it. Very simple.